This is the Weekly You Demon.
We listened to every episode 5 times.
Brian Sims, you are a deranged, evil little man. Well, I don't know if he's actually little or not. I know he's a flaming homosexual leftist who berates a older woman for saying a rosary outside of a Planned Parenthood clinic and then posts it to social media. I think he's real proud of it. And then later doxes a couple, or tries to dox a couple of teenage girls. Honestly, the left is out of control. So here's the thing: if you go to a liberal and you say something like, "You guys have so many freaking nuts on your side," they're going to counter properly. Well, the right has a lot of nuts too. Look at the guy at Charlottesville, or look at Gavin McInnes, which is a bad comparison because you got to listen to what Gavin says, not what people say he says, and he's not that bad. But no matter, undoubtedly, the right has its far-right nut jobs, too. It has its haters and its nut jobs, just like the left does. But here's the thing. You have to find us parallel nut jobs. And that's the allegation, or that's the response, rather. Okay, yes, left. The right also has nut jobs. But find us a nut job that parallels the nut jobs you have on your side at that level of position in society. So this Brian Sims is an elected official. Okay. And there are others out there like that. I'm not sure he might be the worst, but there are definitely other state representatives. And then you have a couple like, that woman out of Dearborn I talked about 2 weeks ago about the insurance rates. You have some far leftists. You have a Bernie Sanders socialist. Find me the equivalent on the right at their level of nuttiness and or hatefulness and the position of responsibility. You're just not going to see it. You're going to find far more people on the left with positions of influence than you're going to find their parallel positions on the right. So that's the test. If you're looking for anecdotal evidence, that's what you want to ask. Like, okay, yes, the right also has some people pretty far to the right, but not like Bernie Sanders. We don't have any senators at that level to the right as Bernie Sanders is to the left. I am willing to bet $100 without even researching it. I'll give you 4-to-1 odds. My $100, your $25. I could be wrong, but I'll give you 4-to-1 odds. You're not going to find a state representative in any of the 50 states that's as far to the right as that Brian Sims is to the left. You're not going to find anyone filled with that much hatred posting to social media like you do Brian Sims on the left. You're not going to find a college professor on the right that's going to come anywhere near 1,000 college professors you'll find on the left preaching that far left crap. So that's what you have to look for. You have to look for parallel nuttiness, parallel hatefulness, and it simply isn't there. Yes, the right has its nuts, but they're all just, that's what they are. They're nuts and they're relegated. They don't get much media time. You know, Alex Jones is probably the highest they can attain. The highest level they can attain in social recognition, whereas on the left, they're in there, they're up there. So again, parallel. And by the way, while we're at it, hatefulness, screaming, extremism, that's baked into the postmodernist leftist creed. You need to understand that. So, you're on the left, and you're part of this whole postmodern type thinking. Keep in mind, the number one thing you detest are all truth claims. And a postmodernist I like, Thaddeus Russell, that's what he says. He says there are no truths. He points out that science has been wrong repeatedly. Things that we thought were absolute truths in science turn out not to be true. So he does not, for instance, he said, I would never, ever, ever admit that trees can't give birth to human babies. He said that might change in the future. We might find out it's possible. And I like Thaddeus, but he lays it right out there. That's what postmodernism is. First and foremost, absolutely positively no truth claims. So then look on someone who's, say, just conservative, a far-right conservative. He is making truth claims, okay? And you might be thinking, yeah, so what, Chesky? Well, here's the so what. If you are making a truth claim, that means you're making the claim that it can be reasoned to, that you can come to this conclusion through some process, presumably of reasoning, logic, discussion. If you have no truth claim, and all you're doing is making assertions of things you want, because subjectively, you're a woman who wants to have a penis, or you want people to treat you like you have a penis, or whatever it is. If you're making that claim, at that point you just have to shout the other people down. Because you admit no truth to get to your claim. It's just your non-truth claim. You want it. It's like the 2-year-old. There's no reasoning to it. It just is what you want. And so by its very nature, if you're making a truth claim, which postmodernists, denigrate and say don't exist, there are no truths, there are only truth claims. If you actually believe in truth, you reason to it. If you don't believe in truth, that there is no truth available, but yet you have positions of things you want, it's just a shouting match, a display of power. And there are people on the left who concede that. And that is not to say, by the way, that all people on the left behave that way or even think that way. There are a ton of people on the left who make truth claims themselves. And you can sit down and you can reason and discuss it with them. Now, there's some people on the left I really kind of detest, to be honest with you. But they're not postmodernists in the thorough sense that they deny all truth. You could actually possibly have a shot, over a beer or probably over a coffee. You may want to, something that's going to, impair the reasoning process. Yeah, I think you can sit down with them, maybe get someplace. But with these leftists, like this Brian Sims homosexual far left dude, now it's just all hatefulness for anyone who doesn't want to fall in line with what you want, and there is no reasoning ability because reasoning implies that there's truth underneath it. So I really got a kick out of this New York Times essay about how millennials are fleeing Silicon Valley and going to no income tax states like Texas and Florida right before their companies go public. And it's a pretty fair article, but there's clear mourning or a sense of unfairness. These people made all their money in Silicon Valley, and right before the money comes in, they go to Texas. But they're lamenting how, these people are, they're leaving Silicon Valley, leaving California, where the income tax rate is 13%. Again, that's just the California income tax. That doesn't count any municipal income taxes that may exist in California. I don't know if they have municipal income tax in California. I gotta believe they do, though. Doesn't count hotel taxes, sales taxes. Doesn't count all that, and those are high in California as well. And then the flip side, then you have all these people going to California, like the homeless, to live on the beaches, live off the public benefits. They had talked a while back that, California may succeed from the union, when Trump got elected. And it's like, that's fine, but we're probably going to be building a wall around California to keep people from trying to get out of California, get into the United States. As more and more people go to California for, one, its great climate, and two, all the freebies that its government hands out. And then as people flee California to get rid of the high tax rates, that place can go to hell in a handbasket. This little article about how these tech company startup millennials are fleeing California right before their options ripen is pretty funny. And a great example of how California would be wrecked if they were on their own. Last week I talked about jail wine. That's not the right term. The term is toilet wine. Which is far more colorful, I think. I'm not sure why they call it toilet wine. The inmates, they don't make it in toilets. They usually make it like in a box or some sort of container that they've smuggled into the jail. Saw a great post this week, Twitter post. Said, these transgender guys who want to compete in women's sports, why? We just need to let them have their own leagues. We'll have male, female, and freak. Or I guess that's not very kind. But, male, female, and effed up maybe. Whatever. But that'd make a lot more sense to me. It's like, well, you believe that there's a spectrum of genders. 70, 200, a million, whatever it is, different levels, different spots in the spectrum from male to female. It seems that there should be a lot more than just two type of leagues, more than male and female. Hey, I read a good article that points out that this year is the sesquicentennial of the advent of Major League Baseball. It started with the Cincinnati Red Stockings in 1869. The actual National League didn't start until 1876. I was a huge baseball fan when I was a kid. It had so much baseball itself. I was just really, really big into the history of baseball. I can tell you, what World Series the Tigers went to this day. I have those memorized. It just kind of stuck with me all those years. When you're a kid, like from age 8 to 15 or whatever it is, it's like your mind is like a sponge. Everything you absorb into it just sticks with you forever. So I can still say, okay, yeah, American League started in 1901, first World Series 1903, and then the National League, being embarrassed, took 1904 off, and then 1905 started the World Series every year since, except for that stupid strike season, which I think is quite frankly where I stopped following baseball when the strikes hit in the 1980s. I was like, screw it, just don't care anymore. Spotify recommendations, and go with Waylon Thornton's Favorite Secrets. Nifty little country rockabilly instrumental. Has fewer than 1,000 downloads, so you'd be like one of the few people who have this on your Spotify list. Waylon Thornton's Favorite Secrets. Also heard a great version of the song Farmer John by the Beachcombers. You have to know that, by the Beachcombers. Farmer John is like Gloria and the other songs that have been covered more often than an Hawaiian up lying naked in Alaska. Just Farmer John's been covered by a bajillion different bands, and a lot of the versions aren't very good, but check out the Beachcombers version. It's pretty cool. A longtime law partner of mine mentioned he is heading down to the American Legion Hall down in Indiana, to drink beer and eat chicken. Reminds me of a Modern Drunkard magazine was reviewing a book called How to Drink Like an Adult. And the reviewer, and I'm pretty sure the reviewer is Frank Kelly Rich, one of my favorite current writers. He just laid into it. He goes, this book shouldn't be called How to Drink Like an Adult. It should be called How to Drink Like a Hipster. He goes, this is all about trendy drinks and crap like that. He goes, if you want to know what adults are drinking, go to your local American Legion Hall, and you'll see they're drinking Budweiser, Pabst, and well drinks with tonic. So, yeah, check. I don't know if you can find that review online, but it's pretty funny. Replete with the F word, as Frank Rich just laid into this, what he called this an absolute stupid book about how to drink like an adult. This 20-something, 30-something, conflating the concept of being hipster with being an adult. Yeah, I'm going to give a plug for those who don't live in Michigan. Michigan in May, I think, is the most beautiful place on the planet. I absolutely love May. And we're actually having a pretty crappy May right now. It's been awfully cold, but Michigan just comes alive. White, pink, bajillion different shades of green. Highly recommended. Lots of purples. And that's just like my area. I'm in the middle of the state. I'm away from the Great Lakes, but then when you get close to the Great Lakes, it's just jaw-dropping gorgeous. I had a couple of huge sightings when I was in California. Oh, my kids saw dolphins, by the way. I wasn't there. I was in the the parking lot taking a nap. We were at Venice Beach, and I just had it. It's like, I'm going to just take a nap here. And they went swimming, and they actually saw dolphins go by. Marina, I saw sea lions under the wharf at Santa Cruz. I had a lesbian sighting in Santa Cruz, and I had a Coptic church sighting in Monterey. I don't think I've ever seen a Coptic church. The Copts, oh, by the way, C-O-P-T-S, the Copts, they're the non-Chalcedonian Christians. After the Council of Chalcedon in 451, there's a lot of animosity between the Chalcedonians and the people who refused to accept the decrees of the council, who became known as the Copts. And the Copts were actually treated pretty poorly. All the non-Chalcedonians were. In fact, some people speculated that helped spread Islam. 170 years later, that when Islam came in, the non-Chalcedonian Christians like, well, frick, we can't be treated worse by the Muslims than we were by our Christian brothers who rejected us because of the decree of Chalcedon that we wouldn't accept. But anyway, there's something like, I don't know, 500 million Copts still in the world, but I've never seen a Coptic church. So I actually went in there and took a couple pictures. You can go to the Weekly Demon Twitter feed and see them. I felt a little bad later that night. I had a couple drinks in downtown Monterey, and as I'm walking by, I saw some people inside the Coptic church. I screamed out, "You effing Monophysites!" Could talk a little bit more about noise and silence. I got quite a bit of feedback on it. I think it really kind of hit a nerve with people, or in a good way. I think that is. One of the first books I read that kind of turned me on to the whole concept of inner silence, and I guess I'd say the spiritual life, would be a nifty little book called A Guide for the Perplexed, by an economist named E.F. Schumacher. Schumacher is kind of like a favorite of the hippies, I think. In the 1960s, 1970s, he wrote a book called Small is Beautiful, and it's supposed to be basically a different way of looking at economics. I'm pretty sure economically he's in the tradition of a guy named Wilhelm Röpke, a German economist, a favorite of Russell Kirk, who championed a third way between capitalism and socialism. I myself am not sure I'm a fan of it, but most people say it's a pretty sane approach with this Wilhelm Röpke and then the Small is Beautiful book proposed, but I've never read either one of them. I did read a biography about Wilhelm Röpke, and it seemed fair enough, like a pretty sane economist. Anyway, E.F. Schumacher was an interdisciplinary thinker and a Catholic convert towards the end of his life, and he wrote this book called A Guide for the Perplexed, which is a takeoff on a classic Jewish spirituality book by Moses Maimonides called A Guide for the Perplexed. And that was probably one of the most stunning books I've ever read in my life. It just opened my eyes to a ton of different things. And he goes into great detail in one chapter called Fields of Knowledge, Part 1. And he's talking about the importance of this Socratic injunction to know thyself. And he points out that in order to know yourself, you have to kind of block out the outside world, and you have to basically engage in meditative practices. Settle down the inner chatter. He talks a lot about that. He talks a lot about the need of taking control of your attention and not having it bounce around like a pinball, like a silver ball in a pinball machine. You need to direct your attention. He points that most people are kind of like just robots, and they get bounced around by different stimulus or different conversations. And a lot of times that the conversation is all internal, and you're just chatting to yourself all the time, and you have no control over the thoughts that go through your mind 24/7, like a movie reel. And he says, there are techniques you can teach yourself, and you can take control of this. I think he'd be a big fan of one of my favorite quotes of all time by Simone Weil. It says, in the intellectual sphere, the power of attention is nothing more nor less than humility. I love that quote. In the intellectual sphere, the power of attention is humility. Because what is humility? Humility is not thinking about yourself. In the intellectual sphere, the power of attention, you don't care about yourself either. All you're doing is focusing on that thing. So if you're writing an essay or reading a book or whatever it is, you're focused on that thing. And if your egocentric self wants to go off on a tangent mentally, I'd rather fantasize about this chick. I'd rather dream about what I'm going to do today after work. Whatever it is, you're then indulging yourself. And by indulging yourself, that's the opposite of humility, because humility is self-forgetfulness. So the power of attention is, in the intellectual sphere, self-forgetfulness. So it's again one of my favorite quotes of all time. I probably read it every day. I have it pasted on my desk at the office. But Schumacher's very much in that vein. And so I'd highly recommend this book. And I was totally stoked to see that you can now get it on your Kindle for $7. It was out of print for years. I have 2 or 3 copies around my study because I was always concerned it'd go out of print and I'd never see it again. And my first copy that I got it back when I was like 25 years old. It's literally over half of it is underlined with like stars and stuff in the margins. I was so blown away by this book. Now, I will say though, Schumacher, his book is clearly in what I'll call like the northern school of spirituality. This goes back to that legendary split between the Zen Northern School and Zen Southern School. The Northern School, one denigrated by the Southern School. The Northern School, they say you're always concerned about wiping the mirror. The Northern School wants to keep the mirror clean, wipe it over and over again. Keep your soul clean, wipe the soul clean, be passionless, detached, etc., etc. And whereas the Southern School is kind of like, no, there is no soul, there is no mirror to wipe clean, there is no particle. Everything just is. That is kind of what we know as Zen today. That existentialist, just look, just be. They believe heavily in like sudden enlightenment. To practice mindfulness, as I've pointed out in other podcasts, mindfulness can start whenever you want. Start right here, right now. It's like, don't need gradual enlightenment. You don't need to slowly get into it and go 10 minutes of meditation a day to 30 minutes to an hour to 4 hours, whatever it is. You can just you can just suddenly become mindful. You can have sudden enlightenment in the Southern School. And so there's that tension between the Northern School and the Southern School and Zen. That tension exists in the Western, or the Christian spiritual tradition as well. But whereas I think the Zen, or what I view as the traditional Zen outlook of sudden enlightenment and just look, just be, get rid of the subject-object, I think that's strongest in the Eastern tradition. In the West, I think it's more the mirror wiping, the constant meditation, and gradually improving yourself, slowly killing off the passions, slowly becoming less and less egocentric, slowly progressing in virtue. And as I pointed out in another podcast, the problem with that Western spiritual tradition is it's very much me. I gotta become passionless. I gotta become detached. I have to be spiritual. I have to meditate. I need to kill the inner chatter. And E.F. Schumacher's book is squarely in that tradition. In fact, even at one point, makes reference to a yoga teacher in the Hindu tradition. And he says, the passage is pretty funny. The passage he quotes is clearly in the Zen tradition of just looking, just being, like even losing sight of yourself. Schumacher's like, that's horrible. You're just being a robot when you do that. You have to take control of yourself. You don't lose yourself and forget yourself. You take control of yourself. You take control of your mind. But there's a ton of good stuff there in the E.F. Schumacher book. And for $7, if you have a Kindle, definitely recommend you get it. Yeah, I should point out though that the Western tradition, the Christian spiritual tradition has its own, what I call existentialist type thinkers, along the Zen lines where they kind of forget the subject object. I'd say there's two of the leading spiritual writers in the West are in the Zen tradition. You have St. John of the Cross, who a lot of people acknowledge as being the spiritual writer par excellence, like number one. And then you have St. Therese Lisieux. And I should do a whole podcast on St. Therese Lisieux, this peasant woman, not peasant woman, this simple woman who was a contemporary of Friedrich Nietzsche. Her path, the little way, is thoroughly Zen, top to bottom. She didn't know that. She didn't describe it in such terms. But her little way of self-forgetfulness is so thoroughly Zen, it's not even funny. And St. John of the Cross for 500 years, and now Therese, I just prefer to say St. Therese because I'm not in freaking France, St. Therese of Lisieux, her little way has just been wildly popular now for over 75 years. And there are others. I think Maximus the Confessor from I believe it's 7th century, I think he has a lot of Zen in him. I think named Meister Eckhart, I don't know if I read that he has a lot of Zen outlook. You also have the great spiritual thinker, Eric Chesky, after 3 gin and tonics. No, I'm pointing out though, I think drinking kind of gives that Zen outlook. So I do think there is that Zen outlook in the spiritual tradition of the West, but it's definitely subordinated to the mirror wiping. And again, if you want to look in that mirror wiping, I definitely recommend you check out E.F. Schumacher's Guide for the Perplexed. It's a short book. I think it's like 170 pages. Highly recommend it. Okay, that's a wrap for the week. Go check out the Facebook page, subscribe to the Twitter feed, tell your friends and family. Go to Demon Podcast for show notes and other information. As always, thanks for listening.